My Little Pony Friendship is Magic ended after 9 seasons and a 9-year run. The penultimate episode featured this controversial scene featuring a child character, Cozy Glow, being turned to stone, sparking huge debates within the fandom and tons of videos on this topic. Imagine that. All discussing whether or not it was right for Cozy Glow to be turned to stone forever. Look how horrified she looks, but wait, no, she deserved it. Look at all the horrible things she did. Look how unremorseful she was. She never could have been redeemed. No, she was just a child. She could have changed her ways. She could have been shown to be redeemed if Twilight just gave her a real chance. But what if I told you we've been having the wrong conversation this entire time? Hey everyone, Atlas Cozy Glow here. I'm back because I have more to say about this little cherub. I wasn't sure if I wanted to make another Cozy Glow video, but Cozy Glow videos seem to have been popping up on YouTube a lot as of late. So who would I be if I didn't throw my hat into the ring? But what to talk about this time? I got it. Let's discuss one aspect of this finale that's always irked me in discussions and video essays, and it pertains to a certain sentiment I see a lot when this finale is talked about, and that's time. How long is Cozy Glow meant to be like this? Well, according to the fandom, forever apparently.
But because, once again, friendship is magic, they lost and were ultimately turned to stone for presumably all eternity.
Do you think Cozy Glow deserved this fate? Honest answers, please, because if you said yes, congratulations, you want to lock a child in a liminal torture for the rest of, I don't know, 1,000 years?
But here's why I tell you that you're all wrong. We've been getting ourselves all worked up over a misunderstanding of this final scene. But before I explain why, first we have to start from the beginning. And by beginning, I mean the end. When I first watched The Last Problem, the question most on my mind was, where was Cozy Glow? I couldn't help but get my hopes up that a grown-up Cozy Glow was gonna show up at some point. But alas, no dice. She doesn't even appear in this stupid gathering of characters at the end. I'm sorry, no Cloud Chaser or Fritter, but still, I left The Last Problem feeling a bit disappointed, but actually somewhat hopeful and optimistic. To be honest, I was actually somewhat reassured by the lack of Cozy Glow. Yeah, we don't see her redeemed, but we don't see her in stone either. It was a clean slate, and to me, this was a good sign that she was out there somewhere. Maybe not seen on screen, but I couldn't help but wonder that somewhere out there in Equestria, there was a grown-up and redeemed Cozy Glow living her life happily, and that, you know what, things did turn out fine after all. But then came the fan reaction. How did the fans react to this? How did the fandom respond to this ending? Everyone who watched this episode seemed to assume that Cozy Glow would definitely be in stone forever because we never saw what happened next, thus creating this great big Cozy Glow conflict and debate online. There was, and still is to some extent, so much discourse about Cozy Glow's punishment online. I can't say it's a surprise, but it is unfortunate. It's tough to talk about the character without this debate inevitably coming up, and some people definitely took it too far. Don't be rude or nasty to anyone who worked on the show, by the way. That should go without saying. But as for me, I gotta be honest. I kinda got swept up into it too. Not the harassment part, but the discourse. Although I was okay with the ending at first, I let the online discourse convince me beyond shadow of a doubt that Cozy Glow definitely really remained in stone forever, and I allowed myself to get bothered by it, and fired myself up, which led me spiraling down this path I've been on for 6 years. And to some extent today I get fired up when I see a take about Cozy Glow I heavily disagree with. Watching that finale again and just being really irritated that they let this great oversight slip by them. But let me tell you, we're all wrong about this scene. Why are we acting like Cozy Glow is definitely going to be in stone forever from this point on? Why are we saying stuff like, how could they turn Cozy Glow to stone and not forgive her? I believe we're all wrong for saying this scene is as definitive as it is. Let me emphasize, we don't know what happened to Cozy Glow. There is no solid proof that Cozy was ever actually turned to stone forever. It's not like we see her statue rotting away in the distant future. It's not like any pony mentions what an irredeemable little shit she is. She was left out of The Last Problem on purpose in order to keep her future vague. It's intentionally kept vague so that you can speculate about her future. The absence of Cozy Glow in The Last Problem is simultaneously the best evidence for her redemption or for her eternity in stone. There's pretty much nothing tangible to go off of, so it's as clean a slate as it gets. So let's stop pretending that she's definitely in stone forever and getting upset about it and arguing about it. I personally don't think that's what the writers were going for. I believe that this ending was meant to be open for interpretation. It was never meant to signify the end of Cozy Glow. It's the last we see of her, but certainly not the end of her. It's a shocking moment, and you can't help but wonder what happens next, but we don't see it. But it's reasonable to assume that Stone is only temporary for her. Vim hasn't ever treated Stone as the ultimate death like a lot of other works of fiction. Stone has been shown to be easily undone repeatedly throughout this series. There's nothing preventing Cozy Glow from coming back. All it would take would be for some pony to will it, and it will happen. There is no Easter Bunny, there is no Tooth Fairy, and there's no eternity in stone for Cozy Glow. And really, I think that's the real, I wouldn't call it magic, but I think that's the real sauce behind this ending. It's not a goodbye to Cozy Glow, it's a see you later to Cozy Glow. Not the end of her, but the end of this particular chapter for her. A chapter which I seriously doubt will ever be followed up upon officially, but we'll get to that in a bit. There's no need to jump to her defense so vehemently, because the future of Cozy's well-being doesn't hinge on this one question. She may be a villain, but she's a filly in need. Of course Twilight will aid her in the future. There's no need for 20-minute exposés arguing why Cozy Glow could have been redeemed. Wait a second. It's funny that the absence of Cozy Glow in the last problem is the best evidence for her redemption, but really I think that's exactly what they were going for. By not showing her, we then have to decide for ourselves what happened to her. So, me, big fan of Cozy Glow, I'm gonna go ahead and decide that, you know what, yes, there is an adult Cozy Glow out there who's living a much better life, having learned from her mistakes, and is much happier for it. Really quick, I do want to touch on Star Strike's video. I think that video makes some good points, and I hope a popular video defending Cozy Glow bucks the precedent set by videos like this. But towards the end of the video, there's this bizarre rant about what happens if you eternally hold a grudge against someone, even after they've totally changed and are begging for forgiveness.
And let's say for a moment Cozy Glow was given a second chance, and she did decide to turn good. Then why should she be deemed unforgivable? If someone has done horrible actions against you or anyone else, tries their best to change, puts in all the effort, and even becomes a stand-up individual helping others and being a positive influence on the world, then why continue to hold anything against that person?
I guess this is a roundabout way of saying that Stone is a statement to not forgive Cozy Glow ever. And while I do think it is an interesting point, it seems to be coming from the precedent that turning Cozy to stone is a declaration to not forgive her. And I think that's missing the point of this scene. Ironically, Discord is a prime example that disproves this. Even after Discord was turned to stone for the second time, it only took one season for Celestia to reintroduce Discord to Twilight and her friends, where she floated the idea of reforming him. This was of course met with heavy skepticism by Twilight and her friends, but it did ultimately result in him being freed and making friends of them. A friendship that only became tighter over time, until he did this, but I've already talked about that. If being turned to stone is the start of something new for Discord, why can't it be the same for Cozy Glow? Oh, because the show is over and there's a big time skip that failed to show Cozy Glow, so she must definitely be suffering somewhere unseen? To be totally honest, it's impossible to conclude one way or the other. So I just explained why the scene isn't what people think it is. So why does everybody think this? Well, there is one bit of evidence that may have caused everyone to interpret this scene as something far more dark than I think it was intended to be. But it's because of this certain line that everyone chose to interpret this scene in the worst possible way imaginable, thus this entire debate started. What am I talking about?
Together forever. I can't think of anything that they would want less.
Yes, I know what Discord said. And you know what? I don't care. I don't care what he said. Just because Discord said together forever doesn't mean Cozy Glow is literally destined to be in stone for forever. To me, this line reads as more of some kind of bit of irony. So now they're quite literally stuck together, whether they like it or not. Together forever. I can't think of anything they'd want less, he says in a sarcastic, snarky tone. I seriously think that this is the source of all the frustration. If we were to take this as our only hint as to Cozy Glow's fate, then yeah, this sucks. It seems like she's like this forever. And how could they do this in My Friendship is Magic? How could they let an oversight like this slip by and seriously end the show by showing a filly being turned to stone for the rest of her existence? It didn't have to be this way. She had so much more depth to give, more character development to be had. How could they end the show by showing a filly being turned to stone for the rest of her existence? They wouldn't. Because like I said, that's not what's happening. Discord's line isn't gospel. Even if this is what he wanted, it's not like his word can't be overturned. I seriously doubt the writers would seriously want Ophelia to be left in stone forever. It's a non-definitive ending. I know it's easy to assume the worst, because of how we last saw Cozy. There's no reason to get all worked up and assume the worst. Cozy's story was left incomplete by the writers. Her story is incomplete. And unfortunately, she seems to have just been a casualty of Season 9 being the final season, and there being way too many plot lines to wrap up. Yes, I acknowledge it's a divisive ending, While I would point blame at the bronies for blowing this out of proportion, I do think it is partly the writer's fault. It's not totally unfounded. If they didn't add that one darn Discord line, I seriously wonder if there even would have been half the outrage that there ended up being. Even with Cozy Stone, if he had said something a little less definitive and more open, like he probably should have, and even without seeing Cozy in The Last Problem, that's a lot less severe of an implication than what his line seemed to imply. But because they added that one Forsaken Forever line, it sent everyone into a frenzy about the ethics of turning Cozy Glow of Philly to stone, and that's ultimately where we are now. But you know, the Brony fandom is no stranger to silly, outrageous arguments, so I'll just leave it there. This is just another Twycorn, this is just another Equestria Girls, or Philly Vanilli. But it is totally natural for our minds to want to fill in the gaps, so whatever. We can infer that Cozy got the worst mistreatment of any character on the show by being unfairly turned to stone forever, or it could look on the brighter side of things and be more optimistic. Anecdotally speaking, I had the opportunity to speak with Lord Tyric's voice actor in person at Everfree Northwest this year. It was the highlight of the con for me. I was so thrilled to meet an actual member of the Legion of Doom. In regards to the finale, I simply said to him, I wish we could have seen what happened next. To which he replied, I hear that a lot. So yeah, he's definitely aware of this. And it's not just him. A couple of years back at BabsCon, I stood in line for Andrea Lipman, the voice of Pinkie Pie and Fluttershy. I had one question for her. Did she think that Pinkie Pie could forgive Cozy Glow? When I asked her, she replied with, yeah, of course. And of course with a tone to me which read as, why wouldn't she? And that was kind of the beginning of my redemption arc, so to speak. The end of me holding this grudge against the finale and treating it like it was this definite thing, and finally starting to see the ending as this open-ended finale that was meant to be taken as not the end of Cozy Glow and the beginning of her being in stone forever, but just the end of a chapter for Cozy, and the end of one chapter is always the start of another. So from then on, I started feeling a lot more optimistic about the finale. Sad we don't see the redemption arc, but a lot more optimistic that Cozy did get that happy ending after all. One extra point I want to add in for a moment is this video response to Star Strike's video that's actually a counterpoint to the main argument that Cozy didn't deserve to be turned to stone. It's 18 minutes long, but I can quickly summarize it by saying the main argument for Cozy deserving her punishment is the fact that they strongly believe she isn't actually a Philly at all. She's either some other creature, or more likely, a mare trapped in a Philly's body. Now, this gets thrown around all the time in Cozy conversations. Well, how do we know she's a Philly? She's probably a grown mare, fully aware of her actions. Now, what's interesting about this video is it brings up an interesting point I hadn't really thought of before. It argues that Cozy's extreme punishments is actually direct evidence that she isn't a Philly, and that the princesses know something we don't about Cozy, therefore these punishments are justified. Now, just looking at School Rays, yeah, something seems weird about Cozy Glow, and it may seem reasonable to assume she isn't a Philly, but honestly, looking at Season 9, they really double down and treat her as a Philly. She even says it herself.
I'm just a kid, so...
She acts and behaves like a Philly still in Season 9, so I don't have any reason to assume she's anything but. Though this video did help me realize something I probably would have liked to have added to my previous video, so let me state it here. Cozy's punishment, as we see in the show, is, in my mind, totally unjustifiable. The only way you justify it is if we assume one of two things. One, she's not a Philly, or even not a pony, i.e. maybe she's a fully grown mare who's had years of experience and has still chosen this path of evil and destruction. Or B, you assume this punishment isn't for very long at all, like a season at most. And as you've seen, we're assuming the latter here, because there's no reason to assume this punishment was for any significant amount of time. But that's just my interpretation of Cozy Glow. I know there are other ways to interpret Cozy Glow. Some see Cozy Glow as far more chaotic and unremorseful than I do. While I believe she could have been taught to understand friendship, others don't believe that. And you know, that's totally fine. As I've been saying this whole time, there is no objectively correct way to interpret her, or anything in literature really, but we don't have to get so riled up about trying to prove Cozy Glow could have been redeemed. I know it's easy to get fired up and want to speak out against this apparently awful ending, and yeah, it is a disappointing ending, one of my demons in fact, but there's some demons we just have to learn to live with. So how do we cope with this? I can talk on and on about being optimistic for Cozy's actual future, but nothing is seen on screen. This is all we're left with, so how else can we cope? Well, obviously there's nothing we can do directly to the show. Nope, don't get any ideas. With G5 unfortunately over from the looks of things, the future of MLP seems uncertain right now. It seems all Hasbro is cooking up right now is an upcoming My Little Pony live-action movie. My guess is it's a last-ditch attempt to save the franchise. Maybe they're hoping for that billion-dollar box office film, but somehow I'm doubtful. I'm also doubtful that Hasbro will ever directly revisit FIM, nor do I think that they necessarily should. Even if they did, I'm doubtful they'd ever touch on Cozy Glow, Tyrek, or Chrysalis again. They'd obviously go the safe route and have it be Twilight. So where does that leave Cozy Glow? What can we do?
Nothing we can do.
No, hang on. There is something we can do.
Buddy, let me tell you a little something about fan fiction.
Go on.
Yes, this is where the fans pick up where the writers fell short. Yes, a tried and true response to disappointing literature outcomes. Let the fans do it themselves. There are a plethora of fanfiction starring Cozy Glow on FimFiction. Many are really, really good and heaps more epic than anything Hasbro ever could have produced themselves. There are even fan comics and fan videos showcasing better endings for Cozy Glow, showing the great dedication her fans have at giving Cozy Glow what she truly deserved. But wait a second, she did come back in the comics. Look, here she is in this comic version of the Odyssey, in this story that's definitely canon. She came back wearing a toga and she thinks she's Trixie. Here she is trying to bake the best sweet treat in the world so she can win Pinkie Pie's super special cupcake. Yes, it's hard to believe we actually had a Cozy Glow comeback in 2024. So does the fact that she's here mean that she isn't in stone forever? Is this unused IDW comic supposed to mean there was supposed to be a Cozy Glow story where she and Chrysalis were free from stone and it was supposed to pick up from this ending here? Oh yeah, it's all coming together. We've come so far. We went from having Comfy Shine, who was obviously some weird cozy stand-in, to having the real deal. Guys, we won. What's the ultimate conclusion to this video? If you like Cozy Glow, then just like her. There's a lot to like about Cozy Glow. She's devious, she's cute, she's hilarious, she's one of the best characters introduced into the later part of the series, and I just think she's neat. Regardless of what they did to her in the finale, or could have done differently, I think we can all agree it's a great big shame we didn't get to see more of her. But like I said earlier, there's still lots of great community content to enjoy, keeping the spirit of Cozy Glow alive long after the show has expired. And hey, on the plus side, us not knowing anything about her personal backstory gives us the freedom to go absolutely crazy and come up with whatever outlandish backstories we want. Cause hey, anything is possible with her, really. And now one last point I'd like to make. I know this moment stings, I know it sucks to revisit, I certainly hate revisiting it, but ultimately, this is part of her lore. And in a weird, roundabout way, I sort of think, that this punishment might be exactly what she needed. Yes, I know, that goes against pretty much everything I've been saying all this time, but maybe some kind of drastic and somewhat scary punishment is exactly what it would take to keep her in check and make her reconsider. And the silver lining to this would be, since she has the capacity to understand friendship as we discussed, it means she has the potential to come out on the other side better than ever. There's a strong likelihood she would reconsider and embrace friendship. She's experienced full well the consequences her actions have. Justified, fair, or deserved, it doesn't matter in this instance. What she did led to this, and once she recognizes that, and is still offered another chance, I think she would take it. She's already been defeated twice, so I think when she comes out of that statue, she'll probably be pissed. But after some coaxing, and maybe some apologizing from both sides, I think she'll be ready to try something different. No longer forcing ponies to be your friend as a symbol of power, but to have real friends who want to be your friend. I believe the future of Cozy Glow is bright, and this moment doesn't in any way prevent her from one day potentially getting the happy end she was oh so close to receiving. She will get a chance to glow, after all. And with that, I'm out to finish editing this video so I can get back to my Cozy fan comic. I'll see you next time.